The office was quiet in that way it only ever is after hours, when most of the building had emptied and the last elevators had long stopped groaning their way up and down. My desk lamp threw a small pool of light across the papers scattered before me, while the glow of the laptop screen painted my face in a pale blue haze. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, steady and unchanging, almost hypnotic. I should have gone home hours ago, but there I was, shoulders stiff, eyes burning, hands still typing as if the project in front of me were the only thing keeping me upright. I was so deep in it that I didn't notice the soft click of heels echoing down the hall. It wasn't until a subtle shift in the air, that quiet awareness you feel when someone else is near, pulled me from my screen. I looked up and there she was, my boss. She leaned casually against the doorframe at first, arms crossed, watching me with that expression she often wore, poised, unreadable, yet carrying the weight of quiet authority. Even in the faint, uneven glow of the office lights, she looked effortlessly composed. Her blazer was off, draped across her arm, leaving only a simple blouse that seemed too elegant for the hour. The faintest trace of her perfume drifted in with her, floral yet grounded, the kind of scent that lingered without ever asking permission. "You're still here," she said, her voice low, not scolding but curious, almost warm. I fumbled for words, straightening in my chair. "Just trying to finish a few things before tomorrow." She stepped inside, her heels muted now against the carpet, and placed her blazer neatly on the corner of my desk. "You've been staring at that screen for too long," she observed, her eyes briefly narrowing as if reading more than I wanted her to. There was something both unsettling and comforting in the way she looked at me, as if she could see past the surface, past the professionalism, down into the exhaustion I didn't admit to anyone. The light from my lamp caught faint lines at the corners of her eyes, not signs of age so much as signs of experience, of years spent making hard choices, carrying responsibilities I could barely imagine. Yet in that moment, she didn't look untouchable. She looked human. I nodded, trying to shake off the heaviness in my shoulders. "I guess I lost track of time." She tilted her head slightly, lips curving into the faintest smile. "That much is obvious." For a long moment, she said nothing else. She simply let her gaze linger, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made me feel seen. The hum of the air conditioner, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the glow of the city outside the window, everything seemed to fade under that look. I shifted in my seat, aware of the heat rising in my chest. Something about her presence filled the room differently than anyone else's ever did. It wasn't just authority, it was gravity. And in that silence, for the first time all night, I realized how tired I truly was, not just in body, but in spirit. She circled slowly around my desk, the way someone might walk through a gallery, unhurried, deliberate, letting her presence speak louder than words. I kept my hands on the keyboard, though I wasn't typing anymore. My screen still glowed with half-finished sentences, but my attention was locked on her. Then she spoke, her voice firm but quiet, the kind that didn't need volume to carry weight. "Shut that laptop." The words landed like a pebble in still water, rippling through the air. I blinked at her, almost uncertain if I'd heard right. She raised an eyebrow, not in challenge, but in certainty, and repeated herself with the kind of calm that left no room for argument. "Shut it. Now focus on me." I hesitated for a beat, long enough to feel the tug of responsibility, the voice in my head reminding me of the unfinished work, the deadlines, the pressure. But something about the way she said it cut through all of that. Not dismissive, not unkind. It was something else, something I couldn't name yet. So I obeyed. The sound of the laptop closing echoed louder than I expected, as if the office itself took a breath. The click was final, sharp, pulling me into a silence I hadn't realized I needed. Without the screen's glow, the room dimmed, shadows stretching longer across the desk. My focus, as she demanded, was now entirely on her. She stood only a few steps away, arms loose at her sides now, her eyes fixed on me with a steadiness that felt like both scrutiny and care. She didn't fidget. She didn't rush. She simply was, and in that stillness, she carried more presence than anyone I'd ever known. I swallowed, leaning back slightly in my chair, try to mask the nervous energy crawling up my spine. Was I doing something wrong? I asked, my voice lower than I expected, almost careful. Her lips curved faintly, the kind of smile that wasn't meant to reassure so much as to disarm. You were working yourself into the ground, she said simply. You didn't even notice how late it's gotten. That's not discipline. That's punishment. Her words surprised me. Not the content. I knew I was overworking, but the tone. Gentle, concerned, yet layered with authority. She didn't just want me to stop typing. She wanted me present. As I sat there, the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade into the background, leaving only her voice, her presence. The faint rhythm of her heels as she shifted her weight, the subtle whisper of fabric as she crossed her arms again. All of it drew my attention away from spreadsheets and deadlines into something far more intimate. The realization that she saw me, not just my output. I couldn't help it. My gaze lingered too long, tracing the way a lock of her hair had fallen loose against her cheek, the calm steadiness in her posture, the quiet strength she carried even in silence. She was my boss, yes, but in that moment, she was something more, someone pulling me out of the fog I'd let myself sink into. And though I couldn't say it aloud, though I wouldn't dare, I knew the truth. I didn't close the laptop because she ordered me to. I closed it because I wanted to, because focusing on her felt easier than breathing. For a moment after I shut the laptop, the silence pressed in on me. I had no shield now, no excuse to bury my face in numbers and tasks. It was just her and me. She didn't fill that silence right away. Instead, she let it breathe. She leaned one hand against the edge of my desk, her fingers tracing the smooth wood in a slow, absent rhythm. It was the kind of gesture that seemed casual on the surface, yet there was a softness in it, as if she were gathering her thoughts before speaking. Finally, she said, "Tell me something." I blinked, unsure. Something? Her gaze held steady, patient but not demanding. About you. Something that isn't in a report. Not work, not deadlines. You. It startled me. Not just the question, but the way she asked it. Most people in the office only cared about results, about whether I was fast enough, sharp enough, reliable enough. But she was asking for more. I shifted in my chair, leaning back as I tried to find words. I don't know what to say, I admitted honestly. She gave a small smile, tilting her head as if studying me. Then starts simple. What do you do when you're not buried under these spreadsheets? I laughed quietly, a little embarrassed. Lately? Not much. I used to sketch a lot. Nothing professional, just it helped clear my head. But I stopped. Work got too busy. Her brows lifted slightly, her interest genuine. Sketching. That's something I wouldn't have guessed. There was no judgment in her tone, only curiosity, and that made me want to keep talking. Yeah, I'd sit in coffee shops and draw people passing by. Or sometimes just objects, little details that caught my eye, a folded umbrella, a pair of worn shoes, things like that. As I spoke, she moved closer, resting her hip lightly against the desk, so near I could see the faint outline of tiredness under her eyes despite her perfect posture. And you gave it up to sit here, staring at spreadsheets. Her question wasn't accusing. It was soft, almost wistful. Like she knew what it meant to give up pieces of yourself for the sake of responsibilities. I shrugged. It felt practical, but sometimes I miss it. It was the one thing that was mine, you know. She nodded slowly, and for the first time, her expression shifted, softened. I do know, she said quietly. I used to play the piano. That caught me off guard. You did. She gave a faint laugh, but there was sadness in it. Yes, hours at a time. But then my career started climbing, and suddenly there was no space for music. Only meetings. Only decisions. Only the weight of being in charge. Her eyes lingered on me, and for just a heartbeat, I saw something rare, vulnerability. Beneath the polished confidence of a leader was a woman who had once created, once dreamed, and still carried the loss of it. The air between us grew heavier, but not uncomfortable. It was a quiet recognition, two people confessing, in different ways, the cost of growing older, of chasing security at the expense of joy. I didn't know what to say, so I simply met her gaze and let the silence speak for me. And strangely, I think that was enough. Because in that silence, something unspoken passed between us. The realization that maybe she wasn't asking me about work at all. Maybe she was asking me to let her see me. And in return, she was letting me see her. She let out a quiet sigh, almost imperceptible, and straightened from where she had been leaning against the desk. For a moment, I thought she might walk back toward the door, retreat into that professional distance again, the safe space where bosses and employees stay neatly divided. But she didn't. Instead, she walked around the side of my desk, slowly, measured, not rushed like someone trying to get a task done, but deliberate, like each step carried its own intention. I felt my pulse quicken with every click of her heels against the carpet, every shift of her silhouette as she drew closer. When she stopped, it was beside me. She rested one hand lightly on the back of my chair, her fingers grazing the fabric near my shoulder. She wasn't touching me, not quite, but the nearness of her hand sent a current through me all the same. I looked up at her, and the angle made her seem taller, her presence even more commanding. Her blouse caught the faint glow of the desk lamp, its soft fabric outlining her form in a way that made me acutely aware of the closeness between us. "You work so hard," she said, her voice quieter now, lower, almost meant only for me. "But sometimes I wonder, who takes care of you?" The question caught me off guard. My throat felt dry, my chest tight with the weight of it. I searched for an answer, but nothing came. She didn't press. Instead, she leaned slightly closer, just enough for her shoulder to brush against mine as she shifted her stance. It was the faintest touch, but it grounded me in ways I didn't expect. Her presence wasn't heavy. It was warm, steady, like a quiet reassurance. I exhaled slowly, realizing only then that I had been holding my breath. "I guess I never thought about it," I admitted. "I just keep going." Her lips curved, though not into a smile exactly. More like an expression of recognition. That's what people like us do, isn't it? We keep going, until something makes us stop. She glanced at the closed laptop on my desk, then back at me. Her hand slid fractionally across the back of my chair, her fingertips so near to my shoulder now that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The office felt smaller somehow, the walls closer, the air heavier with something unspoken. My senses sharpened, the soft rhythm of her breathing, the faint scent of her perfume enveloping me, the gentle cadence of her words. Every detail seemed magnified by her nearness. I turned slightly in my chair, just enough to face her more fully. Our eyes met, and for a long moment, neither of us looked away. There was no command in her gaze this time, no authority. Only an unguarded softness, a vulnerability she rarely allowed to surface. And in that quiet exchange, I realized this wasn't about work anymore. This was about us. The weight of her gaze lingered, heavy and fragile all at once. She didn't step back, didn't reclaim the distance most people in her position would have insisted on. Instead, she stayed right there, close enough that I could sense the faint warmth radiating from her arm against mine. Her hand, still resting on the back of my chair, shifted slightly. She wasn't fidgeting. No, her movements were too controlled for that, but the way her fingertips traced the fabric betrayed something beneath her surface calm. "You know," she said finally, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it, "sometimes people think that being in charge means you're untouchable. Like the title, the office, the corner desk, they make you invincible." She paused, her eyes drifting past me, as though she couldn't quite bring herself to look directly at me while the words formed. "But it doesn't. If anything, it makes you lonelier. Because you can't show anyone that you're tired. You can't admit you're scared. You can't even let people see when it hurts." Her voice caught slightly at the end, so subtle I might have imagined it. But the silence that followed was real. Heavy. It filled the room like a weight, pressing down on both of us. I didn't know what to say at first. No one ever saw her like this. Not the team, not the board, maybe not even her friends outside of work. She was always composed, always the one steadying everyone else. And here she was, admitting, to me of all people, that she wasn't as unshakable as she appeared. "You don't have to carry all of it alone," I said quietly. My words weren't polished, not eloquent, but they were honest. That's when her eyes finally met mine again. For the first time, they weren't guarded. There was a glimmer of something raw there. Exhaustion, yes, but also a plea, as if she wanted to believe me, wanted to trust that someone could hold a piece of her burdens without judgment. Her hand drifted slowly from the back of my chair to the edge of the desk, her fingertips brushing against the surface just inches from mine. It wasn't intentional, maybe, or maybe it was. Either way, I found myself inching closer, my own hand resting near hers. Close enough that the warmth of her skin reached me across that small gap. She didn't pull away. Instead, her breathing deepened, steady but heavy, like she was carrying years of unshed confessions. "It feels dangerous, letting someone see me like this," she whispered. "Maybe it's not dangerous," I replied, my voice quiet but steady. "Maybe it's just real." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say more, but the words stayed locked behind her silence. What she gave instead was a look, long, lingering, filled with more meaning than anything spoken. And in that look, I understood. She wasn't asking me to solve her problems or to lift her burdens. She was asking me to be there, to notice, to care, to stay. It was a confession without words. And somehow, it was louder than anything she could have said aloud. Her hand stayed near mine on the desk, the space between our fingers narrow enough that I could feel the faint pull of her warmth, as if invisible threads connected us. For a while, neither of us moved. We just sat in the weight of that silence, letting it press against us like a tide. My chest tightened. I could feel my heartbeat quicken, not in panic, but in anticipation, that restless rhythm that comes when a moment is asking to be bridged. And for once, I didn't second-guess it. Slowly, carefully, I let my hand shift closer until my fingertips brushed against hers. Just the lightest touch, so soft it could have been accidental. But it wasn't. Her breath caught, subtle, almost imperceptible, but I felt it in the air between us. She didn't move away. She didn't close the gap either. She simply let the contact exist, a quiet acknowledgement that she wasn't running from it. I turned my palm slightly, enough to cover the back of her hand with mine. My skin met hers, warm against warm, steadying me in ways I hadn't expected. For a brief second, I worried she would pull back, remind me of the lines we weren't supposed to cross. But instead, she let out a slow exhale, and her thumb traced the faintest line across my knuckles. It was such a small gesture, but it unraveled something inside me. Not a command, not a dismissal, it was permission. A quiet yes, spoken not with words but with touch. The office around us seemed to vanish. The ticking of the wall clock, the faint hum of the air conditioner, even the glow of the city lights beyond the window, all of it faded into the background. All I could focus on was the warmth of her hand beneath mine and the unspoken emotions braided into that stillness. I swallowed, my voice quiet when it finally came. "You don't always have to be strong." Her eyes softened, and she tilted her head just slightly, as though the weight she carried pressed less heavily in that moment. "And you don't always have to hide how much you care," she answered, her tone no longer commanding but tender, almost vulnerable. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I didn't. Instead, I let the silence say everything we were both too careful to admit out loud. My thumb brushed lightly across the back of her hand, a mirror of the way hers had traced mine. She didn't move away. In fact, she shifted closer, so close that I could feel the warmth of her shoulder grazing mine. It wasn't a dramatic embrace, not some sweeping moment of passion. It was quieter, softer, the kind of nearness that felt like a promise. The tension that had been building for weeks, maybe months, wasn't broken. It wasn't even fully released. It simply settled into something more fragile, more real. And as I sat there, my hand wrapped gently over hers, I realized something simple yet profound. Closeness doesn't always need words. Sometimes, the gentlest touch speaks louder than any confession ever could. For a long while, we didn't speak. Our hands remained joined on the desk, still, steady, and strangely natural, as if this closeness had been waiting beneath the surface all along. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm, a shared stillness that neither of us felt the need to escape. Eventually, she drew in a breath, her fingers shifting just slightly under mine. "It's late," she murmured, her voice low, almost reluctant. I nodded, though I didn't let go. "Yeah, I guess it is." She glanced down at our hands, her lips curving into the faintest smile, a smile that looked half amused, half tired, and entirely real. "This wasn't what I expected when I came in here." "What did you expect?" I asked softly. Her eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, she let me see the truth. "Not this," she admitted. "But I'm not sure I mind." Something in my chest loosened at her words. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze, a wordless answer, before finally easing back. Slowly, carefully, as though breaking the contact too quickly might shatter the moment we had built. She didn't withdraw completely. Instead, she rested her other hand lightly on my shoulder, her fingers brushing against the fabric of my shirt. It wasn't a businesslike gesture, not a formal pat or a casual touch. It was softer, almost tender, the kind of touch that lingered because it meant something. Her thumb traced a small, absent line across my shoulder, and I felt my breath catch. It was such a small thing, yet it rooted me to the present in a way I couldn't explain. "You're different," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "You listen." I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "Maybe that's all you needed tonight. Someone to listen." Her smile deepened just slightly, touched with something wistful. She let her hand rest there a moment longer before drawing it back, though the warmth of her touch stayed with me long after. The office was bathed in soft light, the desk lamp casting golden shadows that stretched across the room. Beyond the window, the city glowed in muted blues and yellows, streets alive even at this late hour. But in here, it felt as though time had slowed to a crawl, holding us in this fragile pocket of stillness. She finally gathered her blazer from the corner of my desk, draping it over her arm. "You should go home," she said, her tone warm but still carrying that familiar edge of authority. "Rest." I nodded, but there was no mistaking it. Something had shifted between us tonight. Something neither of us would pretend hadn't happened. As she reached the doorway, she glanced back at me one last time. Her eyes softened, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good night." "Good night," I replied, my voice steady but my chest thrumming with something unspoken. And when she left, the room felt different. Not empty, not lonely, just changed, charged with the quiet promise of a connection that had finally been acknowledged. For the first time in a long while, I didn't dread tomorrow. I looked forward to it, because tomorrow, when our eyes met again, we'd both know the truth. Tonight had been the beginning of something neither of us could ignore.